You guys are just about the nicest crowd that I've ever spoken to. Brian, that was awesome. You are a really tough act to follow. Antonio, thank you for that introduction. Thanks to each of you for sharing a bit of your morning. I'm honored to be here. I've never been to Nebraska before, and I wanted to get a feel for the state. So I checked out the Nebraska projects on Kickstarter. Folks here have all heard of Kickstarter, I'll presume? Awesome, awesome. So that image of a guy looking out over Lincoln, Nebraska represents a movie concept about a man who returns home from a business trip and falls into old habits, old relationships, and then finds himself eager for a way out. The filmmaker behind this project is raising $6,000 so he can make the movie, and he plans to start shooting in just 2 weeks. Oh, thank you, Seattle. The guy's from Lincoln, Nebraska, and is going to shoot here. Thank you for that catch. I was actually wondering, I was going to look it up on Wikipedia, because I was like, that is a large metropolis, and I didn't know they had that. Thank you. Thank you for your catch. Thank you. X-Files, the musical, is a backyard musical production from the, see if I can remember this, the Colonel Mustard Amateur Attic Theater Company in Lincoln, Nebraska. And they have already blown through their $1,500 fundraising goal. More than 1,000 people showed up for their performance. Gluten-Free in the Great Plains is from a, do folks know the woman behind it? A woman here in Omaha who loves to bake, but found out recently that she can't eat gluten anymore. So she raised $5,000 so she could build a baking facility that lets her make vegan, gluten-free cupcakes for the people of Omaha. That last image is from a music composer who loves the scenery and history of the Ashfall fossil beds, a natural landmark here in the state. And he's composed music inspired by that scenery. And he raised $11,000 so that the Nebraska chamber music players could perform his work. So then I took my Nebraska learning tour to Etsy. Folks here are all familiar with Etsy, I'll presume? Yeah, awesome. I found that there are 44,000 different items on Etsy made by crafters here in Nebraska. We're looking at 4 of them. And actually that plate full of flowers is actually sugar cookies. Wanted to mention that. I read the profiles of the people who made these items, and they used to work office jobs all day. They crafted things only as a hobby in their spare time, as a way to make gifts for friends and family. Most of these people could never have secured the investment you need to build a prototype that a factory can manufacture. They couldn't have persuaded Macy's or Walmart to sell their product or raise millions of advertising dollars to get consumers to buy their product. It's a process which lets only a lucky few become designers. And of course, it's a process which can suck the personality out of your creation. Then Etsy came along. And now crafters can pursue their passion as their day job. They don't have to break through all the barriers that until recently stood in the way of anyone who wanted to make beautiful things for a living. So after checking out the Nebraska offerings on Kickstarter and Etsy, of course I had to go to DonorsChoose.org and check out some of the 500 projects that teachers in Nebraska have gotten funded through our site. Those two, oh, thank you. Those two kids are kindergartners whose teacher got funding for a listening center which plays books out loud and lets kids read independently. That girl is a first grader whose teacher got funding for books and materials that discourage bullying. Those 3 kids now have flashcards to practice and master math concepts, and they also got supplies to help them measure things and see how math is a part of everyday life. That kid behind the microphone is a 6th grader whose teacher got funding for a PA system and a microphone so that she could launch a poetry slam for her students. At DonorsChoose.org, teachers go straight to the public with their best ideas for helping students learn. They don't have to get the sign-off of a bureaucrat or first pay their dues. There's nothing standing between their idea and a potential supporter. There's a big change underway in how long you have to wait and who you have to know and how lucky you have to be to bring a good idea to life. There's a new kind of marketplace where gatekeepers do not stand in your way. This new kind of marketplace pushes intelligence and decision-making out to the edge. That's a phrase used by energy and security companies to describe nodes of a network that can think for themselves. Imagine a network of security cameras where each camera has software to detect what's a risk and what's not, instead of relying on a central office for that assessment. I want to illustrate this change, this new kind of marketplace, by sharing the DonorsChoose journey with you, how the site began, how it took off, and how I want to push intelligence and decision-making out to you today. Show of hands. How many of you had a teacher in high school who you really looked up to? Someone you wanted to be like? Hopefully it's most of you. All right, about half of you. For me, that was my English teacher, Mr. Buxton, who was also my wrestling coach. When I showed up as a dorky freshman, he talked to me like he would to an adult. If he approved or disapproved of something I'd done, I knew it right away because he didn't put on that mask that some teachers do when they're talking to kids. If I asked him a question on Wednesday, he'd come back to me on Friday saying that he'd thought about it, and he really had. He made you feel like he wanted you on his team. Looking back on it, I think it was Mr. Buxton who made me want to be a teacher. So 12 years ago, I started teaching history at a public high school in the Bronx called Wings Academy. Now, the school where I was teaching did not have the same resources as the school I'd gone to. Where I went to high school, we went on field trips into the woods. We had calculators for trigonometry. We had the supplies you'd need for just about any art project. We did not want for anything. But when I started teaching in the Bronx, I saw firsthand that all schools are not created equal. My colleagues and I would spend a lot of our own money on copy paper and pencils, but we often couldn't get the resources our students needed or do the projects that would excite them about learning. We'd talk in the teacher's lunchroom about books we wanted our students to read, a field trip we wanted to take them on, a microscope that would bring science to life. I figured there must be people out there who'd love to help if they could see where their money was going. So using pencil and paper, I drew a website where public school teachers could post classroom project requests and donors could choose a project they wanted to support. For $2,000, a programmer recently arrived from Poland was willing to build that site. It was super rudimentary. The back end was one web page that you'd scroll down for like 15 minutes to get to the teacher or project you were looking for. To process a donation, I had one of those black boxes you see at the grocery store where you punch in the credit card number and the dollar amount and send it over a telephone line. It was like PayPal, only by hand. It was a good thing my students were helping out. So then I had to get my colleagues to try out the site and post the first projects. So I asked my mom to make the dessert that you see behind me. Roasted pears with orange rind and apricot glaze. They taste something awesome. I brought the dessert into the teacher's lunchroom and I put it on the table. But before my colleagues could scarf it down, I said, hold up. There's a toll. If you eat one of these pears, you have to go to this newly created website called DonorsChoose.org and ask for whatever it is you most want for your students. Propose the project you've always wanted to do with them. It took only a few minutes for my colleagues to destroy the 11 pears, and they posted the first 11 project requests on DonorsChoose.org. The health teacher wanted to do a pregnancy prevention project, and for that she needed Baby Think It Over dolls, which are life-size, life-weight dolls that cry at 3 in the morning and need to be fed and show a teenager what it would be like if they had a kid. The English teacher requested SAT review books. The art teacher requested fabric and thread and needles so that her students could do a 20-foot by 30-foot quilt. My aunt, who's a nurse, and my uncle, who's a minister, funded the first project, but I didn't know any more donors to fund the other 10 projects. So I funded them myself, which I could afford to do because I was still living at home with my parents. And I donated anonymously. So my colleagues mistakenly thought that the website actually worked. And false rumor spread across the Bronx about this place where teachers could bring their dreams to life. And teachers started posting hundreds of projects which needed a whole lot more money than what I could afford. I was in a tough spot not knowing how I was going to get those projects funded. My students came to the rescue. They could see the potential of this experiment to change their lives at school. And I think they felt bad for me. So for 3 months, they volunteered after school to spread word to potential donors. They put together 2,000 letters by hand to people all over the country, telling them about this website where somebody with $10 could be a classroom hero. We sorted the mail ourselves to get the cheapest postal rate, and every desk in my classroom represented a different postal region. We carted the sorted letters to the post office and crossed our fingers. It worked. The efforts of my students generated $30,000 in donations to projects on our site. We were on our way. Then 9/11 happened. And teachers at the schools beside Ground Zero started posting projects on our site for recovering in the wake of the attacks on the World Trade Center. There's a math teacher who requested calculators for her students because their original set was sealed at the disaster site and their classroom had been relocated to a basement. There was a high school teacher who wanted to bring in an Afghani artist to do after-school workshops so students could learn about Afghanistan. There's a first grade teacher who wrote about her students being saved by a particular group of firemen, and they wanted to do a musical performance to thank the firemen who had saved them, and for that they needed musical instruments. There were hundreds of these projects related to 9/11, and I thought that local media would jump on this story. This was right when people yearned for a tangible way to participate in the recovery effort. The Red Cross had almost too many blood donations, and here was this direct way for people to help. But no local reporters would give me the time of day. I must have called 100 of them with no success. So I figured I better aim higher. The Holy Grail was the New York Times, and they had a new reporter covering nonprofits and philanthropy. Her name was Stephanie Strom. I knew that if we could get her to do a story about our website, we would have a shot at big-time impact. So I mailed Stephanie a package of materials. I didn't hear back, so I called her up. She was nice to me, but said that we were pretty small potatoes. She said if ever she was doing a roundup, a list of online charities, maybe she could mention us, but we were not newsworthy. Damn. Then I found a directory of the top people at Newsweek, and I called the senior editor, Jonathan Alter, because his last name began with A, and he showed up at the top of the list. I called him during my lunch hour, And his assistant must have been out to lunch because he picked up the phone. And I said, hey, I'm a teacher up in the Bronx. I started a nonprofit with my students. Do you want to hear about it? And he said, sure. He didn't hang up on me. We talked for 45 minutes, and he wrote a column on the Newsweek website that night saying that he thought this experiment growing out of a classroom in the Bronx would one day change philanthropy. So I called up the New York Times reporter, Stephanie Strom, all excited, and I said, hey, this Newsweek editor thought we were newsworthy, at least for their website, so won't you give us a second look? Well, then she dashed my hopes. She said, I'm not going to touch your story with a 10-foot pole now that another reporter has covered you. The New York Times does not follow in the footsteps of other publications. I felt like an idiot for having told her that another media outlet had broken the story of DonorsChoose.org, so I sent her an email apologizing for being so dumb. Stephanie took pity, and she wrote back saying that I shouldn't feel bad because I didn't have a chance in the first place since her editors had asked her to focus on charities responding to 9/11. There was my last opening. I crafted an email to Stephanie Strom talking about the hundreds of classroom projects that teachers beside Ground Zero were posting on our site. And I called her up as well over the weekend so I wouldn't interrupt her while she was on deadline. And I left her a voicemail saying, this is the last time you're going to hear from me. All I ask is that you read this one final pitch. On Monday, I was back at school teaching, and I checked email in between periods. Stephanie had responded. She said she wanted to come do an interview for a major feature story in the New York Times. Let me tell you, I was over the moon. My parents raised me to be humble, but at this moment, the skies had opened, and I had to shout. I forwarded Stephanie's email to my friend, and I said, guess who wouldn't touch our story with a 10-foot pole and now wants an interview? That's what hustling will get you. Wait, do you see where this goes? So I beat my chest. I talked all kinds of trash. I thought I was forwarding Stephanie's email to my friend. I'd hit reply. I yanked the cord out of the computer, but it was too late. I sent that trash-talking, machista email to Stephanie Strom, philanthropy reporter for the New York Times. So naturally, I sent her another email apologizing once again for my stupidity. And to Stephanie Strom's eternal credit, she did not hold it against me. She went on to write a feature story for the New York Times suggesting that DonorsChoose.org might be the future of philanthropy. Thank you, Stephanie, for not holding it against me. And we've tried to prove her right. As of today, 800,000 people have given over $100 million to classroom projects posted by teachers at half of all the public schools in America. Thank you. We've delivered books, art supplies, field trips, technology to 6 million kids from low-income families. I sure never thought that I would be at Big Omaha one day sharing numbers like that, so thank you. So here's how it works. When a teacher submits a project for funding, we first make sure it's legit, and we email follow-up questions to the teacher if anything is unclear about the student learning that'll take place. This school year alone, we'll get 125,000 project submissions, each of which needs to be carefully reviewed and authenticated. That obviously represents a heck of a lot of work, and we used to pay people to do it. But we struggled to get those workers to step up when we had a lot of projects and to stand down when we had fewer projects. We struggled to train them and to hang on to them. It took us 10 days on average to vet and post a teacher's project request. Then we realized that we could enlist our best teacher users to vet other teachers' project requests. So now, if you're a teacher and you've had 20 projects funded on DonorsChoose.org, and you've proven yourself to be an especially responsible, responsive user, you're then invited to donate your time vetting other teachers' project requests. Think of it as academic peer review meets Wikipedia. And now that we crowdsource this labor instead of paying people to do it, the time it takes to vet a teacher's project request has gone from 10 days to 1.5 days. That's the power of pushing intelligence out to the edge. So now the project's up on DonorsChoose.org, and it's time to push intelligence out to our donors by asking them to decide which projects are worthiest of support. About 25,000 project requests are live on our site at any given moment, and that represents a tough choice. There's a lot to choose from. So we encourage donors to express a personal passion. The town where they grew up, the sport they played in high school, their favorite book as a kid, and see projects which match that passion. A couple years ago, a writer for Fortune magazine was doing a story on Kiva, and DonorsChoose.org is the two websites that Fortune thought were going to change philanthropy. And the writer was decently impressed by our site, but at the end of the interview, he said that his personal passion, the cause dearest to his heart, was saving the salmon in the Pacific Northwest, which was a nice way of saying he would not be giving it our site. But before he left the room, I did a keyword search for salmon, and up came 5 classroom projects as results. The second project was from an Oregon high school teacher who had created a salmon hatchery in the river flowing by his school, and he needed hip waders for his students to maintain and build out the hatchery. The top result was a project from a teacher on an island off Alaska, teaching in a one-room schoolhouse. She wrote in her project essay that she was 45 minutes away from the nearest store by airplane, and her students are Native Alaskans, and they had recorded their parents' folk tales about salmon, done research on salmon, and wanted to share that work with the outside world. For that, they needed a printer and a scanner. So here was this guy who had 5 projects to choose from, which matched his specific passion for salmon. And when we pushed intelligence out to him, I bet he made a wise choice as to which salmon project was worthiest. In fact, there's a group of kids in Oregon who now have hip waders to build out their salmon hatchery. When you push intelligence out to the edge, your users start to see themselves as your coworkers. I want to tell you about one teacher who illustrates this dynamic. Debbie Gardino is a special education teacher in Chesapeake, Virginia. The big reason she became a special teacher is that her son has Asperger's, and his doctors and his teachers said that he would never graduate, never be independent, but Debbie believed otherwise, and her son proved otherwise. He now has a master's degree, and a few weeks ago he got married. Debbie's had 60 classroom projects funded through our site. One of them was for touchscreen tablets that have allowed some of her students with cerebral palsy to communicate for the first time. When Joplin, Missouri was hit by a tornado, Debbie took matters into her own hands. She flew down to Joplin on her own dime, of her own volition, and she went door to door telling any teacher who'd listen about DonorsChoose.org. Some of the teachers she spoke to told Debbie about Will Norton, a high school senior who was driving back from graduation when the tornado sucked him out of his car. And what people said about this young man struck an especially deep chord with Debbie, so she dedicated her mission to him. Debbie inspired more than half of all the teachers in Joplin, Missouri to post 800 projects on our site, 800 calls for help for rejuvenating Joplin classrooms. These projects requested playground equipment, classroom furniture, first aid kits and flashlights, therapy resources like knitting needles and yarn, musical instruments, books, and more books. 5,000 people across the country gave over $500,000 to fully fund nearly every Joplin project. The outpouring of emotion from Joplin teachers and their donors, the messages they posted back and forth, the thank you notes and photos that teachers published was something to behold. At the reopening of Joplin schools, teachers greeted Debbie with screams of joy. Many of them had had enough projects funded to rebuild their entire classrooms even better than they were before. Debbie shows how so-called beneficiaries can become organizers when you push intelligence and decision-making out to the edge. Now I want to push decision-making out to you. Our board of directors has made a really nice donation so that I can give each of you a $10 DonorsChoose.org gift card for you to spend on the classroom project of your choice. When you walk out the doors in just a few minutes, you'll be given this gift card. I encourage you to express a personal passion, see the projects which match, spend your gift card on a classroom project which really speaks to you. Now, I'm lucky to be speaking to a group of people who include a lot of early adopters and entrepreneurs, so I have one more challenge for you. I want you to use the DonorsChoose.org API to engage the public in public schools. This guy did just that. And Stephen Colbert, who's a board member of ours, gave him a trophy for it. Also, I just wanted a gratuitous way to mention that Stephen Colbert is on our board of directors. So let me explain. A year ago, we opened up all the data generated by 230,000 teachers posting 400,000 classroom projects, which attracted more than 1 million donations. The data includes info about the teacher, what grade they teach, the projects they've had funded in the past, whether they're a Teach for America Corps member or not, info about the school, its poverty rate, latitude and longitude, whether it's a charter school, info about the project, tags like history, field trip, enrichment, the essay the teacher has written, the individual items they've requested, even the search queries performed by donors are part of the data set. It's a mountain of data, and we opened it up so that people could make discoveries about what teachers most need in particular communities and what teaching methods they're finding most effective. We also built an API so that developers could build apps using our data. And we launched a contest, grand prize being a trophy from Stephen Colbert, to get people thinking. One developer built a 4-square DonorsChoose mashup, which shows you classroom projects geographically and topically targeted to your most recent check-in. So if you check into a music concert, you'll be shown a nearby classroom project from a music teacher. Another developer built a web browser plugin for Amazon, which shows you classroom projects requesting the very product that you're about to buy for yourself. So if you're purchasing a digital camera on Amazon, this plugin will show you that there's a nearby classroom requesting a digital camera, and you can add a $10 donation so that you can do for someone else what you're looking to do for yourself. That guy built an app which lets you display within your email signature a specific classroom project. And that project is the most urgent one matching your interest area. So for example, you could say that as part of your email signature, you want to display the single most urgent technology project from an Omaha teacher. And now companies, ranging from Starbucks to startups, are using our API to integrate microphilanthropy into their products. My dream is that by pushing intelligence out to you, you will come up with killer ways to engage the public in public schools and get kids the materials and experiences that they need for a great education. I hope you'll start by spending that gift card on a classroom project that you really love and see what a difference you can make when no gatekeepers stand in your way. I hope there are some questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you, guys. Just such a wonderfully generous audience you've been. Thank you.
We're taking questions right up front, and that may be the first straight up standing ovation everyone we've received so far. One more time for Charles Best. Please make your way to the front, to this microphone or one over here if you have a question for Charles. And I'll get it started, Charles. You talk a lot about making your users feel like coworkers. Whether you're doing work like yours or something different, what are some ways you'd recommend you can make your users feel more like coworkers?
Well, one is never to underestimate just how much labor and what portion of your value add your users might be willing to shoulder as power volunteers, as power editors. So Wikipedia is probably the greatest example of this. But what we learned, what was interesting to us, was that when we crowdsourced a major piece of our workflow to our best teacher users, our so-called beneficiaries, we didn't just turn paid labor into volunteer labor. We got better labor from those teacher users. They vet and screen projects with more rigor than paid workers did. They vet and screen projects more quickly, more efficiently, more productively than when we were paying people to do it. So I would just encourage folks to think about what pieces of your operating model, what pieces of your workflow your users, your consumers might be willing to undertake and even compete for the privilege of performing for you.
Good morning, Charles. Hey, thank you very much. Awesome presentation. Love what you're doing.
Thank you.
My name is Greg, and my company is sold into the education market for the last 25 years. So I really understand what you're doing. We understand how teachers think, their needs, what they don't have, what they'd like to have, how they're trying to make things better. My question for you is twofold. One, I understand the principle behind what you're doing, getting the funds there where they're not. How do you partner, or do you partner with other organizations out there to actually go and secure what it is they're looking for? Or is it just random? Someone just decides, oh, I'm going to go to Best Buy and get these computers. And are there affiliate programs you have with them to say, to be part of our organization and to help with this cause, here's what we're looking for?
Thank you for asking that, because for the sake of time, I wanted to, I cut out what we do with a project after it's vetted and posted. So when a project is funded on our site, we do not pass through cash to the teacher. We purchase the materials and have them delivered to the classroom. Even if it's therapeutic horseback riding for disabled students, we're paying the horseback riding stable to provide that service. We're able to do that because as part of submitting a project, our teacher users have gone shopping for what they need in an electronic procurement system that about 18 different retailers are plugged into, ranging from Best Buy to Dick Blick Art Supply, Catalog, and Canon Sports. And the teacher can effectively put together a multi-vendor shopping cart covering the exact items that they need. They decide what product will best suit their students' needs. And then when that project is fully funded, we can automatically fulfill it. And then we also provide a platform for every teacher, for every project, to publish photographs of their project in action, an initial thank you note, an impact letter describing the student learning that's taking place, a cost report showing how every dollar was spent. You will see this when you spend your $10 gift cards on projects of your choice.
Okay, the second part of the question is, if you want to become part of that, to be able to be a Dick Blick or whoever it is that they're choosing from, how do you do so?
Charles@DonorsChoose.org is my email, and I'll put you in touch with our operations team.
Thank you very much. Great job.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, Charles.
Hey.
Testing. All right. So we've heard from a lot of awesome entrepreneurs that have built some amazing businesses and raised a lot of money. And I think it was Seth yesterday who said, it's not about the money, it's about the money. What would you say to young entrepreneurs that are trying to start something that might convince them to do a nonprofit for social good rather than trying to have the $100 million exit?
That's a good question. Well, of course, there's now this new breed of for-profit that is as much for a purpose as for a profit. I feel like Kickstarter and Etsy would go in that category. They have an incredible impact on society, even though they might be incorporated as for-profits. And now there's a new breed of nonprofits. I'd like to think DonorsChoose.org is one of these that operate with as much technical agility and as much focus on data and as awesome a performance management system as any for-profit. Charities used to be stereotyped as a bunch of like saintly people who are going about their work in a way that wouldn't pass muster at like a young company, a young for-profit company. And we tend to recruit people from the for-profit sector who join our nonprofit, and it's because they want to be in an environment which is every bit as technologically agile as a startup, but where they know that every ounce of their labor is addressing educational inequity. And there's almost this like merger of the two where you can almost like not tell the difference between a for-purpose company that's incorporated as a for-profit and a non-profit that's super agile and recruits from the for-profit sector. They're almost like blending and mingling. Thanks.
My name's Andrew, and I'm curious, in some of the earlier articles it talked about how what DonorsChoose is doing is changing the shape in which we donate. So I'm curious, it sounds like kind of the connection between the donor and then the end result is what you've kind of bridged here. But what is, in your opinion, broken in the overall donation system as a whole within our world, and how would you compel us to approach that, both as a giver, entrepreneur, developer, et cetera? Thanks.
Thank you for asking. That's an awesome question. One thing I think is broken, not just in the donation system, but in the solutions to society's challenges system, is most people still want to do bottom-down innovation. From on high, from academia, from headquarters, they want to design a prescription and deliver that prescription to people on the ground. Expert-designed solutions are necessary in a lot of areas, but I think there need to be more bottoms-up models of innovation where it's not so much a prescription as a platform where people on the front lines who know the people they serve better than anybody else in the system can come up with their best ideas for helping people. We believe that classroom teachers know their kids better than anybody else in the system. And if we can tap into their pent-up expertise and imagination, we're going to unleash better targeted, smarter micro solutions than what a lot of administrators would come up with from on high. And that's really similar to Kiva, which is based on the idea that a woman in Ghana often knows best how $500 could launch a village enterprise and employ people. So it's just the idea. I think the general idea is models which tap into the pent-up expertise of people who are on the front lines and then create bottoms-up innovation are how I think we can fix the system, even apart from giving people a super sweet donation experience, even if they've given just $1.
Good morning.
Morning.
Great talk. I'm going to ask you a question that has some real serious logistical issues behind it, but I want to get your opinion on it. I'm a father. I'm an engineer. As my son is transitioning into high school, I'm planning to do some volunteering in some of the classrooms where my expertise can augment what the teacher is providing as a lecture. Do you have any plans to establish maybe a cadre of individuals, such as you define in this room, who can literally explode the classroom experience for kids? I mean, the mind power here I know is just amazing. A lot of these lot of these people working with cutting edge technologies that teachers don't have access to, and if teachers had a vetted, established group of people in a community they could appeal to come in and do one-day lectures, workshops, demonstrate technology that the kids wouldn't normally have access to. I mean, is that something you guys have considered or are working on?
Well, our first hope is that we can tap into the brain power in this room, as you put it, by persuading some of you to rock out with our API and to mine our data. To your point about people being able to volunteer their time as well as to give money to support classrooms, we are experimenting with some ways to enable teachers to say, I have a volunteer need, not just a financial need, and then to let donors give time as well as money. We're still very much in the experimental stage. I don't know if it's something that we'll be able to bake into our model, but in kind of a lean startup way, we are experimenting with just your vision. Thank you again, guys. I so appreciate it.